Tonight on Need to Know, we'll learn why some say the justice system, the media, and the public are disregarding filicide in the disability community. How the homicides of those with disabilities at the hands of a relative are going under the radar. That's next. Also on the show, creating a space for women of color in the arts to gain visibility and power. A look at the inequities that exist in our local art scene and how one group intends to change that. Don't go anywhere. An all-new Need to Know starts right now. If it bleeds, it leads is a mantra that can describe the types of stories covered by media outlets. Murders, fires, and robberies are generally top stories for some local news outlets, but not the unfathomable crime of filicide, particularly in the disability community. Filicide refers to the murder of one's own child or relative. In the past 5 years, it's been documented that more than 650 individuals with disabilities in the U.S. have been murdered by a family member, relative, or caregiver. The actual number of victims is believed to be much larger than that. Every March, advocates for individuals with disabilities gather around the country for a day of mourning to remember and honor the disabled victims of filicide. The Center for Disability Rights led a vigil on the day of mourning earlier this month. Take a look.
Thank you so much for coming. This is our annual day of mourning that we work in cooperation with Not Dead Yet and the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. Every year, we have a list of names of folks that have been murdered by their caregivers or family members, and we take this time to honor them. Because so often in the media we find they'll talk about the people that killed them, they'll talk about their disability, but they won't talk about the person like they're a human. Peter Abrams died January 18th. He was 97. After Peter objected to the way that his AIDS husband had used his credit card, the man threw him out of his wheelchair and bashed his head against the floor until he died.
Oftentimes when people with disabilities are killed by family members or caregivers, that they either are not prosecuted at all or they receive lighter sentences. What we want is equal treatment under the law.
Lee Moyi, May 9th, at the age of 46. Lee's mother thought that he would have a tough life after she died, so she killed him by drugging him with sleeping pills and then strangled him. She had other options, but she rejected them all. She didn't think they could care for him as well as she did.
The lives of people with disabilities are lives worthy of living. I don't think any person with a disability should be made to believe that, they're a burden or anything like that.
Joining me to discuss more about this issue, why it's going underreported, and efforts underway to bring justice for disabled victims of filicide is Stephanie Woodward, Director of Advocacy at the Center for Disability Rights, and Erica Jones, Systems Advocate also at the Center for Disability Rights. And welcome to both of you. Welcome back, I should say. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So when I told people about today's show and about this particular segment, the majority of people said to me, I didn't know about this. I didn't know that this was an issue, and this is totally new to me. Is that surprising to hear for you, or not surprising to hear a response like that?
No, it's really not. Just in the way that these stories get reported, it's something that people don't think about, because when, for instance, a mother kills a child because of their disability, there's an element of pity for that mother. And that's all really anyone focuses on. They never learn more about the child. They never, often they don't even show the picture of the child. They don't discuss their name. It's just, this person was disabled, so of course this is why their mother killed them.
Yeah, I don't think I'm surprised at all. And not only is in reporting, it's often brushed under the rug, but sometimes it's not reported on at all. And when we see the justice system not following through to really bring justice to the disabled lives that are lost, it makes it less newsworthy for people to see, because nothing happened to that mother who killed her child. She just got probation. So a lot of these stories are just brushed under the rug, and there's still disabled lives that were lost.
You mentioned the numbers that have been reported, and it's underreported. A number of cases unreported, I should say. When we look at this, we have numbers, the data is from the last 5 years, while this is an issue that we all know has been going on for decades. So why the reason for just that 5-year data point as opposed to more information being available about the actual numbers?
Honestly, oftentimes the only real numbers we can get is from disabled people who are going out and collecting the data when they see the stories. We don't see any national, federal database of this. It's disabled people who find these stories across the nation and collect them. So we believe it's underreported because we can't catch every single one. And if it's not reported on at all, we certainly wouldn't know about it.
Erica, you mentioned, you kind of explained, you gave this example of how a child murdered by a parent without a disability is looked at differently as opposed to a child or an adult with a disability murdered by a parent, a relative, or a caregiver. In terms of, you mentioned kind of how that's looked at when it comes to the media rather. How is the public viewing this, and how is the justice system kind of looking at these two crimes in a very different way? How would you explain that?
So when it comes to the public, it's really not that much different because of the way that the story is framed. The information that they're getting, I've seen in comments, there were 2 women who were killed in Rochester, and both times I looked at the comments, and both times it kind of gave sympathy and acceptance to the murderers. Of course they were killed because they had behaviors, or of course they were killed because they had a disability that made the other person's life difficult. So these stories are directly impacting what the public is seeing and how they feel about these deaths.
What does that type of response say about what do you believe that type of response says about where we are as a society?
It tells me that disabled lives are still not considered worth living. And that's something that CDR and something that Not Dead Yet have been working on changing that narrative, because we go out, we work, we go to school, we live lives that we feel are worth it, and how dare someone try to make me feel like I'm a burden to someone else?
I think it also creates this idea through society that it might be acceptable. If you see one mother harm her child and the judge says, well, I understand why you did that, then the next mother thinks it's okay as well. And then we see that perpetuated. And of course, it impacts disabled lives. I remember being a very young child and learning about the story of Tracy Latimer, a young woman with CP. Her father put her in his truck and connected the exhaust all the way to the cab of the truck and killed her. And he said he did it because he loved her. And now, cerebral palsy is not my disability, but it's very similar to mine. And I grew up listening to the adults around me talk about this story and say, well, I could see why he did it. He's not like a real murderer, because like his life was just so hard. It must have been a real burden raising a child like that. And imagine being a disabled child listening to adults around you saying that it's okay to kill a disabled child.
Responses like that incredibly dangerous, and as you said, they can lead to what some describe as copycat crimes.
Right.
The repetitive nature that you said, that pattern. How, one question, in terms of New York, is filicide of an individual with a disability, is that treated as a hate crime in our state or no?
Not that we've seen. We have seen if it's a stranger. We have seen some hate crimes come up from disability if it's not related to family. But when we're seeing family involved, it's not deemed a hate crime. Oftentimes it's deemed a tragedy, which is just not the case.
So how, I guess the big question, I'm sure people watching this right now are thinking to themselves, how are these types of cases prosecuted? I mean, is there a pattern that you have seen of the cases that have been reported when you kind of look back at that track record? Is there a pattern that you see in terms of how they're being prosecuted?
We're certainly seeing lighter sentences and a lot of pity from juries and from judges. There was a woman who would drown her 2 autistic sons in the bathtub, and the judge gave her sympathy and said like he could really understand why she felt the need to do that, and she served no time. That's problematic.
Are you, as CDR, lobbying for legislation right now to make this a hate crime in our state?
Oh, well, that's not something we're working on right now. That's always in the back of our minds, that it should be considered a hate crime, particularly when things happen locally and you have to sit there through the trial and you have to look at the people who do these things, and then you hear from the back, you're ruining her life.
That was a local trial.
That was a local trial from a woman who lived in a group home and was put into a hold that killed her by 2 people who worked there.
And then the response that you're ruining her life, that was in reference to?
That was family members of the murderers.
Wow.
So we're more concerned about ruining the lives of the murderers than losing lives and holding murderers accountable for what they've done.
Talk to me about your work right now in terms of not only raising awareness, but also the work in terms of seeking justice for victims. What are you working on together or with other partnerships?
Well, we've certainly been working a lot on working with the media to represent these stories appropriately. We need to know the names of the victims. We also need to know their lives, and we need to stop relating their disability as the reasoning that the person died. Just about 2 years ago, there was a murder. A man killed his daughter with a disability here in Rochester, and immediately the news outlets went straight to disability. That then excludes any other possibility of why he might have murdered her. Was there a different crime happening there? Was there some sort of inappropriate behaviors between the father and the daughter, and she might have wanted to expose that? But if you just blame disability right off the bat, then you are excluding all of the real reasons that this could have happened in a deeper crime. So we're working on changing the way that reporters talk about these stories, in hopes that that also changes society's view and also the justice system. We focus a lot on this with what they call romantic mercy killings. You might have seen this with an elderly man kills his wife and then kills himself, and they call it like a romantic murder, like suicide, because like he just didn't want to live without her, or she was suffering from dementia. That's murder. That's not romantic. And it's also domestic violence. And why don't we view it as that? We are romanticizing the deaths of disabled people, and that's a problem.
for people who are watching this right now and they're thinking, because one thing that we try to do on the show is say how everyone is involved in an effort to change something. What would you say to our viewers who are tuning in and want to do something?
I would say next time a report comes out like this, ask questions, ask more about the victim, try to form thoughts that are more productive than, oh, it must have been so hard for this person who killed them, is definitely a start.
I think it's important, particularly online, challenge those comments that you see where they say, it must have just been so hard, or I could see why they did this. Non-disabled people or disabled people who are not involved in this need to start challenging those comments and saying it out loud. Don't let these thoughts continue to be spread, but also get involved in disability rights organizations. You could see how pervasive this is and become part of the solution in a much more active manner. And also expect your judges that you vote for to hold people accountable. Ask these questions when it comes to election time.
All right, well, we have to close for now, but a special thank you to Erica and Stephanie for your time today and for your work to raise awareness and seek justice for victims of filicide in the disability community. To learn more, reach out to the Center for Disability Rights. You can connect online at cdrnys.org or call the Rochester office at 585-546-7510. Rochester is often praised for its dynamic art scene, but just how inclusive and equitable is that scene? Members of a recently formed art group say not enough, and so they decided to do something about it. A number of heavy hitters in the arts world, many renowned in Rochester and some around the world, recently launched the Woke Art Collaborative, Woke being an acronym for Women of Color. The multi-generational collective of Black women and women of color creators are advocating for each other and finding ways to support other creatives in Rochester working to impact the community. Joining me from the group to share more is Rachel de Guzman, founder of Woke Art Collaborative, who is also the president and CEO of 21st Century Arts. Rena Golden, founding member of Woke Art Collaborative and also the founder and managing artistic director of the Avenue Black Box Theater. And Dolores Jackson Radney, founding member of Woke Art Collaborative and co-owner of Kumba Consultants. And welcome back to all of you. It's great to have you back together for this topic, so I appreciate it. So when some people talk about the Rochester art scene, they will say that it is flourishing with opportunities. And I would imagine that some of you and some members of your group might say, yeah, to a certain extent, but not entirely. So I want to know, in what ways do you see inequity in our local art scene here in Rochester?
I think you see you do see, I mean, everybody in Woke Art Collaborative, every member is very active in the community. They're very prolific in their art making. And I think really it isn't about what they're not doing. It's about resource allocation, it's about visibility, and it's about the most resourced organizations and institutions in our town not being very equitable and not being very diverse. I mean, that's been true for a long time, even though starting in probably 2006, 2007, almost every conference in every field that you go to, it said equity, community, diversity, racism, and we really are even behind other places as far as women of color being represented at the tables, at those tables of decision making, and again, a matter of where the well-resourced organizations, and that's just a fact. I mean, if you were to look at those organizations that get the most resources in Rochester, we don't have any equity there. We don't have people of color, and that is not just lost opportunities for us as people, women of color. It's also has a negative impact on the field.
Right. Talk about that. What is that negative impact? What does that look like?
Well, I can say that the reason that we started Kumba Consultants is that we wanted to create opportunity for ourselves. And so one of the things that Woke Art Collective is going to be is a self-determined and defined group to go out and look for anything that we decide that we want and we think is equitable and fair for us, as we've been doing this work in community already. And so it's just a continuation, and we're better. We always say that we're better and smarter together, and so the fact that it's a collective even brings more power and possibility to our community.
And even looking at that idea, I love that both Dolores and Rachel were talking about really what it means to work in collaboration for the greater good of the community. Like, this collaborative really is about, you know, bringing our individual light, you know, to the table, to a very important table too, because it's not always about joining. You know, it is. We love the idea of joining. All of us are a part of different organizations. We've been a part of boards and committees, but sometimes it's about creating new tables specifically because we want to create new models of what it really looks like to collaborate, what it really looks like to become, to start off as equitable, right? Versus going back and trying to figure out, okay, how do we become equitable after we've already created all these systems that are not equitable? So starting, you know, from the ground up, and I think when you look around at all the different women that are a part of woke art, you find that we have some really strong models in our own businesses, in our own art forms, in our own fields, that really, when you put those things at the table from the start as a foundation, it really changes the game.
And one of the things that both of you have touched on that I think is critical to really focus on is that we're not a reactive organization. It is not our intent to go around and like, look, oh, that organization's not being equitable, or this is not equitable. That's not really what we're about. It's like Dolores and Rena were saying. We have ideas, we have concepts of what the art scene should look like. We are innovators. Every one of us, all 11 of us, have innovated in some way within our careers and with the work we're doing. And just imagine how powerful that can be when we come together and we're innovating. And so we're not really looking over our shoulders and saying, what aren't people doing? We're actually creating a forum to be able to develop the work that we think should be done.
Before we talk about that forum and kind of get into the nuts and bolts and the details of that, how did all of you find each other? Because I know Rochester it's a small community and we know of each other, but what was the kind of the thinking in terms of, these are the 11, these are the women that we have to have at the table to be a part of this, that will really be able to spearhead this work?
And I could speak on that a little bit. I mean, it's through relationships. It's through working together on many projects together. And this was something that, in the broadest concept, certainly it's evolved into something even different than what I had thought of in the beginning, was something that I was concentrating on and thought of when I was doing a fellowship on equity in the arts in New York City. And I wanted some kind of center for equity. I named it some crazy name that woke art is really much better. And that was one of our first collaborative moves, was to come up with a better name. And I'll give credit to Michelle Harris and to Kaylin Rich for kind of working that out at one of our first meetings. But so I actually went to people that I knew. And I went to Rena first, because Rena and I work collaboratively on so many levels these days. But we've worked, some of these people I've worked with for like 15 years in some capacity or another, and then they've worked with each other. But everyone in the group has created something of their own. So they had, even in an inequitable world, they had developed some kind of power, empowered themselves to actually create things. They're innovators, they're creators. And the other part of it that was critical from my vision was that some part of their work was involved with social justice. And so then it was a matter of, I think I tapped 9 people, and then a couple of other people were tapped from the conversations. But the first time we were in the room together, we actually knew that the group was right. I mean, the energy and the excitement and everything were really great. And I didn't really worry about the people that weren't at the table, because I figure that we're starting something and maybe other people will start things too. We're not jealous of other people deciding to collaborate on something that they do too, because, you know, that's all only better for Rochester if they do. But we we feel good with the group that we have.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the tables that you are creating, so people know. I know that you are intended to be a place for ideas and action. So what does that mean? What does that look like? And what do you want to bring to Rochester?
I think also continuing to, one part of it is continuing to further the work that each of us are doing, but also, like Rachel says, many of us have, I've worked with everyone that is a part of Woke Art, and continue to have, projects that we're working on, even as we're forming, Woke Art, and thinking about, future collaborations as well. And so a big part of it does have to do with how do we support each other as well as other women of color artists out here as they are also coming forward in that too. Just like Rachel said, it really is, it has a lot to do with, finding space for us to, create this, but also, create other, things around town and even outside of town, because many of us, work outside of Rochester as well together.
And I was just thinking about the power of the table and sitting around the table and sharing ideas and making something so powerful, and the excitement of not knowing exactly what it might be right now, but with that, the power of everyone coming together with their strong ideas, with their own vision. I think we all are game changers and visionary. And so, and bringing those ideas together can only benefit something that we all care for, and that is community.
And one of the most radical things we did was come together. I mean, I think that, we have this tagline, a game changer for change agents, because we are change agents, but just that's a declaration in a town that doesn't necessarily recognize Black and brown women, that we actually have a vision. And we do collaborate. It brings all the collaborations that we've done in the past. It actually makes them more visible, and we actually are launching. And it was funny because we were launched, and that was something that the writer actually, an article that came out, that we were launching Empower. We said we were launching Empower. We're launching Empower as far as being very confident in why we're coming together, and also having a space. The fact that we have our own space is a game changer.
You recently, before we started filming, you talked about how you've had a couple of open house events, and you've had people kind of check off this box and say, yes, I am a woman of color and I'm a creative, and you were being introduced to people that you had never met before. So in addition to kind of honing in on who these people are and how you can support them, is there one thing that you're really excited about? We've got 30 seconds left coming up that is you want people to know.
The directory. Reach out to us, because we are trying to compile a directory, and that was something Nigel Gage Thorne, one of our collaborative members, put as one of the first actions we had, because people will say, I can't find somebody.
And this is the way.
And do you know anyone who, we all get that question often. Do you know anyone else who does this, does that? So that
we have to close for now, but I want to thank you all for being here. And you can learn more about the Woke Art Collaborative, its upcoming events, and its crowdfunding campaign at facebook.com/WOC Art 585. And that wraps up another edition of Need to Know, Rochester's news magazine. I'm your host, Helen Bianduti Hofer. Thank you for joining me tonight and throughout the weekend here on WXXI TV. I'll see you next week.